I'm Morgan Doremus with RT Book Reviews, and I'm here today with Peter V. Brett, the absolutely amazing sci-fi fantasy, well, I guess fantasy more than sci-fi.
Yeah.
Author, and you have a series out right now, and you've got 2 books so far. We have The Warded Man and The Desert Spear, and I think what makes these so interesting is kind of how you came up with the story. There is a backstory of after 9/11. You were living here in New York City,
Yeah.
and that's kind of where the idea came to you.
Well, I had the idea for the book a couple of years before that about the setting and the demons coming out of the ground and kind of isolating humanity, but it didn't really come together emotionally for me until 9/11 when I saw how that affected everyone in New York. Like, I was in Manhattan on the day. I had family in the Trade Center who were able to get out. They were evacuated, but we didn't know that at the time. And so I was in a high-rise office building and kind of watching the chaos on the streets. I had to go down and get my wife, whose parents were the ones that were in the Trade Center, and like the chaos on the streets. And I say chaos because everybody reacts to fear differently. And that was what really stuck with me that day and in the months that followed, that everybody was afraid and everyone was doing something different to deal with it. And that was what I wanted to touch on in the first book and show, like, something when an oppressive fear takes over a society, how it affects people. And so the demons are kind of a background, but the human story is more what drives the series.
And in the first book, in The Warded Man, you actually have several stories that come together at the end. So we see several different protagonists and what they're dealing with. Can you go through maybe each one of your characters and say a little bit about what speaks to you with each of their particular attachment to the society they live in and what they're going through?
Okay. So the main character in the series is Arlen, who he was originally the basis for the whole story. I'd written this little short story about a boy named Marlon who had never been more than 4 hours away from his home because he had to get back before dark, because dark is when the demons come out. And he would always push the window on that. Like, he'd set out in the morning and he'd go as far as he possibly could and then reach that point of no return and have to come back. And I had written that story years before, and I always kind of wondered, like, what's over that next hill that he can't get to? And so the series started out as an exploration of that. Each one of the 3 protagonists is scarred by a demon event in their childhood. So Arlen, I don't want to give anything away, but like Arlen, there's a demon attack on his parents' farm, and some people get hurt, and it really disturbs him to the point where he feels so helpless that he has to run away and find a way to deal with that, because he can't just keep hiding every night. And that facing your fear is what allows him to do these wonderful things as life goes on. It's not that he's special in any way. He just stopped running and turned to face what he was afraid of. And that's the theme that kind of runs through the story. So the second biggest character in the story is Leisha. And the way that the series is set up is that humanity has been hunted almost to extinction. So having the next generation is really important. Kids are encouraged to get married very young, have children very young, have as many children as they can. And so because of that, like, I wanted to touch on what that did to the women in society and how they're kind of, I don't know if oppressed is the right way of saying it, but like, because the survival of the human race is so important, they're kind of pushed into that life.
What's expected of them becomes very paramount to society.
Right, right. And so Leisha starts out like wanting nothing more than to get married and have a ton of babies. And then again, a demon event in her village pushes her onto another path and makes her realize that there's more to life than just getting married and having babies. And she studies and becomes a healer and a scientist, and because of that, again, like, stops being pushed into what the world is telling her to do and goes her own path. The last character is Roger, who, again, there was a attack on his family when he was young, and he was left an orphan and adopted by a kind of has-been trooper who was a singer and a juggler and a performer. and he's kind of raised by this man who doesn't even like him sometimes, and he kind of grows up terrified of demons because he has these memories from when he was very young, and trying to come to terms with that while not having any kind of real attachments in his own life. And he finds out that the music that he makes can affect the demons and manipulate the way they act. And it's that discovery that kind of pushes him to go on and do other things.
So it sounds like all of your characters in that first story, it's all about overcoming fear, and it's all about pushing boundaries. You know, what's kind of like you said, what's over that next hill?
Yeah.
What can I affect? What's going on with me? They're not so much looking necessarily at themselves anymore too. They're also turning outward, and what can I do for kind of humanity, because it is really kind of falling apart there. So is there any greater messages that you're trying to send with this fantasy?
Well, I mean, I think that the nature of adventure is pushing boundaries, and in traditional fantasy, it's always there's a quest, and you want to travel a long distance, and you're going to go and do some great thing. But the reality in life is that it's those little decisions that affect your life more than these great quests, and sometimes when you decide to push a boundary, you discover a whole world that you didn't know was there, and that's the adventure in life. And I wanted to get into that human story rather than some big, there's a magical who's-its that we have to hunt down. And so I try to keep the series very low magic. There's a little bit of it, and it will increase as the series goes on, as things escalate, but it's always about people making decisions and how those have a ripple effect throughout their entire life and through the lives of the people around them.